Welcome to Cause Before Symptom, uncovering the real cabal and spiritual forces that are controlling the world. And now, here is your host, James Carner.
Welcome to Cause Before Symptom. I'm your host, James Carner. Today is November 28th, 2025. Almost the end of the year. Whoo, it's creeping up quick. Yeah, so tonight we're going to be talking about west-east correction, new location of the Cave of Treasures. A couple days ago, I was just completely on fire, and I wasn't paying attention to detail, and I basically got my west and east wrong. And I placed Eden in a place where, for some reason, I thought it was east of the cave, but Eden is west of the cave. So I naturally picked something that would look like Eden on the east side, and, well, I screwed up. So tonight we're going to be talking all about that correction and the original location of Eden and the supposed location of the Cave of Treasures. And yeah, I will show you where the plume goes and how, even though I made a correction on where I was screwed up on where Eden was, it still didn't change what the plume showed us. It actually showed us where the Cave of Treasures is. So that's good news. Hey, man. I'm just a human being. I make mistakes. But tonight I wanted to clarify that, make sure the mistake is done, and move on. Shout out to everybody on the live chat Rumble. Number one warrior is Boots. Boots saying, all right, all right, all right. Hello, Pastor James on the Rumble airwaves and creator of Elite Potion Detoxifier. He says, yum, yum, get you some and boost your energy. Hello, fellow warriors and new listeners. Let's hit that thumbs up button. Thank you. Yes, Rumble will only like me if you hit the thumbs up button or like button, but they don't care about how many subscribers I have. Number two warrior is Scorpion saying, hey, Pastor, hey, warrior fam, James, you're going to find the cave before they find the Epstein files. Right? Yeah, I'll find the cave before they release the Epstein files. That would be hilarious. You know, I'll find the cave before they release GTA 6, of all things. And number three warrior is Texas militia official saying, howdy, guys. I gotta admit, even though I drank a coffee, I'm here. Number four warrior is Robert Gertison saying, great to be amongst the truth seekers. Howdy, everyone. Well, I feel like we're the right ones and we're right on track. That's how I feel, but, you know, we could be completely wrong. But, hey, isn't it fun doing it? And isn't it fun being on this trajectory, being ahead of the curve, ahead of the game, trying to find the truth? That's what I think. It's a blast for me because every day I'm just doing research and just diving into as many details as I possibly can find. And as I've been like spent hours looking at the topography of Ethiopia via Google Earth. And I've been exploring, going up rivers, finding caves, going down, up, around lakes and valleys and mountains and volcanic activity. I got to tell you, man, Ethiopia is beautiful, just beautiful. And the one thing I noticed, there are so many churches on Google Earth. So many churches, and there are a few mosques, but there was way more churches. And when you get around the pinpoint of Eden, where supposedly Eden was, dude, all around that area is church after church after church. And it's really bizarre. And obvious, if that really was Eden, they would feel a sense of holiness, wouldn't you? If you're walking on the ground that Eden once was, that would be quite cool. And so, dude, I just did some research and a rough guesstimate as to how many churches are actually in Ethiopia. It's anywhere between 80,000 and 150,000. That's a lot of Christian churches. This country is holding secrets that are blowing our minds, and we're going to continue to discover what we can about it. All right, guys, let's get into breaking news.
Welcome to Shitty Breaking News with your host, James Carner, offering his shitty opinion.
Suspect in shooting of National Guard members faces murder charges. Well, duh, you killed somebody. Yeah, again, I'm telling you guys, that whole Afghanistan dude was probably CIA plant, and he was MK Ultra, or he was probably a pedophile, and they said, okay, well, you know, you've got two choices. You can go to jail as a pedophile or go to jail as a murderer. And so he chose the latter. That's how it usually works out with the CIA. Trump's response to shooting shows intensified anti-migrant stance. Well, he did put a ban on Afghanistan. No Afghanistan immigrant can come over here, apparently. Trump says he's canceling all Biden orders that were signed using an auto pen. Sure. Good luck with that one. Show me the orders. I believe there were, 150,000 orders using the auto pen. Hegseth order on first Caribbean boat strike. Officials say, kill them all. Hegseth's like, kill them! Kill them all! All those drug traffickers. Well, they're not drug traffickers. These are just pictures of boats that the Navy uses to take pictures of them looking like they're killing drug dealers in drug dealer boats. And we're not there for drugs. We're there for oil. Come on, man, get smart. We don't care about smuggling of drugs because the CIA does it. And they make loads of cash off of it. And we found all of this out. There's even been movies about it, how the CIA and the Army work hand in hand by delivering drugs from one country to America on purpose to keep our people high and dull so we don't rise up against the esoteric dynasty families that control us. So as long as we keep drugged up, they don't care. They don't care if you die on drugs either. But that's just how it is. Trump plans to pardon former Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez. Pardon him from what? He doesn't live in America, does he? That doesn't make any sense. Westfield Valley Fair shooting. 2 people injured in shooting at Santa Clara South, in California. So apparently, not only do they have zombies and vampires in Santa Clara, now they have shooters. Hey, shootings happen all the time. This isn't anything new, all right? So keep your pantyhose on. Let's see if we can find some more news here, because really there ain't crap. So apparently that shooting was at Westfield Valley Fair. It was at a fair. It's like, of all places. Yeah. Northwestern, I believe the train company, reaches $75 million deal with the Trump administration to get federal funding reinstated. Oh, no, Northwestern University. Okay. So they reached a deal to use Trump's propaganda instead of China's propaganda to propagandize our children. Wonderful. Officials had been warned over a year ago before the Hong Kong fire. Sure they were. Yeah, residents apparently last year raised concerns about a flammable foam panel and scaffolding netting. Yeah, because that's what they study and they know about. And they're like, oh, we knew. We tried to warn them a year ago. No, it was a satanic ritual. So that's about all it was. Volodymyr Zelensky loses brother in arms in Kyiv power shift. Who gives a shit? Remember, the Ukraine war is all about money. It's not about land. It's just about making money. You know, when you order, 2 million rounds of ammo, you can only store it in a warehouse for so many years. It has an expiration date. And so you've got to use that ammo, right? If you're going to go into war with fresh ammo, just in case. So all of that stuff has to be used. Ukraine is floating the penny for it. Now, of course, we are too, because we're the ones sending money over there and then turning around and buying our weapons. Well, they're buying our weapons with the money that we give them. And that's the only thing that's keeping our economy going, is that war and all the money going through there. No, we're not making money off of selling iPhones. I'm shocked that Apple is still even in business. They're not selling as many as they want to. Any other interesting news? U.S. halts all asylum claim decisions in wake of National Guard shooting. Asylum claim decisions? Yeah, right. Pope Leo the 14th begins his first apostolic journey bound for Turkey. Well, good luck there, Mr. American Pope. Don't forget you work for the devil. Apparently there's a measles outbreak. Isn't there always? Black Friday and Cyber Monday specials are going on right now. God. And Ukraine agrees to a peace proposal with only some minor details to settle, officials say, but there's no word from Russia. Like Russia wants to stop this war. No, they would love, a couple more miles of territory, and they really need to open that up so they can ship stuff through the Black Sea. And that is breaking news. We're going to go to a quick commercial, and when we come back, we're going to set the record straight on the West and East Eden conflict that I started. Stick around.
I'll give you $10,000 if you can find just one person who's never filed a tax return.
I'll give you $10,000 if you can find just one person who's never filed a tax return.
Have you ever filed a tax return? Yes.
Nobody. Not one. It starts at 16. That first job, that first form. The moment they became a taxpayer. Every April 15th, millions keep signing the same contract, thinking it's the law. But it isn't the law that binds them. It's the signature. 98% of Americans never owed it. Learn more at unincorporatedassociations.com.
Yeah, learn more. Hey, I did it. You should. You know? You want all your tax dollars to go to Israel while they kill women and children? Go for it. Get to the point where you can keep your tax dollars legally, right? Because the system's set up this way. Banks and major corporations set up unincorporated associations. So you should too, right? That's what they do. What's the problem? There is no problem. It's illegal. And they have lawyers that can show you, yeah, this is it. Federal income tax is only for federal employees. Are you a federal employee? Well, I'm not. So that ends that little problem. All right, here we go. West Coast, East Coast, Eden, Cave of Treasures, correction, new location of the Cave of Treasures. A little bit. We were a little off, but that's okay. Again, as I said in my show the other night, not last night, we spoke about the true history of Thanksgiving, which was a Debbie Downer. Wah, wah. But the night before, we were talking about the cave. Is it west of Eden or east of Eden? And the Ethiopian Canon says the cave is east of Eden. They had to go downhill and then a little bit up, downhill into the cavernous, nasty, volcanic shit land, and then a little bit up is where they settled in a cave. And I think we are closer to finding it than we were 2 days ago. Now, that's the thing about doing research. Sometimes you just get a little ahead of yourself. I did. For some reason, I don't know why, and I was completely wrong. I was putting Eden east of the Cave of Treasures, which would make it closer to the Red Sea, and that's not true. So we're going to fix that and then show you a real image of where Eden should be placed. In fact, I'm going to show you a little picture here. Now, if you look down to the bottom left, you see Garden of Eden. That's directly under what's that? Lake Tana, okay? Now, Lake Tana, from there all the way to that yellow button that says Garden of Eden, or pin, that yellow pin says Garden of Eden. All between there are like thousands and thousands and thousands of churches, like insane amount of churches. And the Blue Nile actually goes down from that lake right there, that green lake, Lake Tana, all the way down to there. And I even looked at Lake Tana and I found there are 2 islands there. And those 2 islands are monasteries, one for men and one for women. And of course, the men got the bigger one. Of course it did. But literally, there's one for monks and one for nuns. And that is where supposedly the original canon was stored, the original 5th, 6th century Tewahedo Orthodox canon, and also where the Ark of the Covenant could have been stored. We don't know, but Mussolini never found it. Now, going up, you're not going to see it very clearly because I have it hidden, because I have an image over an image, and the image over the image is the volcano plume. Okay, now the red line at the top is the volcano plume, and I just circled all the way around it. And what that does is it circles around what would be 2 pins. One would be the pin of where the volcano went off, which is to the top left, and then the other is the Cave of Treasures to the bottom right. So that shows us that they came from the Garden of Eden from the left. They traveled east, but kind of went a little northeast, right? But we don't know if Garden Eden, the pin is exactly right there. It could be north. We just don't know. But this is like the supposed area. Now, I don't know if you notice, but the Great Rift, can you see it from the bottom middle? And it looks like there's this great rift that cuts through the entire land all the way up to the Red Sea and the Gulf of whatever the heck that is. Well, that's what they call the Great Rift. And the Great Rift is where Adam and Eve went into, the Great Volcanic Rift. And that's where they were forced to go by God after they left Eden, which is on the left side of this Great Rift. And so the coordinates and satellite images and everything that we could find, we put the volcano and the plume right in the direction of where I believe God is showing us that we need to look for the Cave of Treasures. Now, hopefully that makes a little bit more sense, okay? And here, we'll show a more detailed approach. You see, we have the Hayli Gubbi volcano. We have the Cave of Treasures. Below, we have the Garden of Eden. And then here's the plume, okay? The plume erupted right around where the obvious volcano is and where the Cave of Treasures should be located, which I believe this is a sign God is saying, go this way, look for the Cave of Treasures this way, because what we're looking for is the tablet of witness. And the Ethiopian Canon in the Book of Adam and the Cave of Treasures talks about them writing on a tablet, speaking about and speaking in Ge'ez, the original language. So it shows it right here. This is the original spot right here. That is somewhere around that area is the Cave of Treasures. So now you know. And then we have a video of the Cave of Treasures where I actually went even closer. And then we're zooming in. And it shows this area. And it doesn't really show anything. Nobody lives there. It's all black basalt and just fire. It's all lava rock, okay? And there's really nothing around there. I didn't find any real caves. I did find some interesting, weird anomalies, but I dismissed them as volcanic activity. But there seems to be something to the right of that could be a cave. I don't know. But something could be there. That could be the exact spot. And if you guys are interested, I have the exact coordinates, the location, and that is where the volcano blew, where the plume went through. And this is connecting the prophecy, basically, as what I'm trying to do, because Adam wrote that in the end of days, when man doesn't believe in God anymore, they're going to find it. And I don't believe it's going to be, anytime soon. I think I'm the person to start this journey for whoever's going to take up this information later and run with it. Because I do believe we still have, if not more, 115 years left until the coming of the Son of Man. But again, no man knows the hour or day, but we may know the season and the year. My guess puts it at around 115 years. And we've talked about this before. So, west and east correction, new location of the Cave of Treasures. Now, there are moments in this journey when the land itself corrects the research. And the land actually helped me a little bit, but not too much, because I kept mixing east and west because I got a little ahead of myself. And when that happens, well, it doesn't whisper, it erupts like a volcano. And tonight is about correction, not failure. I didn't fail. I just made a mistake, right? And it's not a contradiction either, but we're just refining what we're looking for. Because over the last several weeks, I traced the Cave of Treasures west of the volcanic boundary. And that's not right. I was believing that the plume would point back toward Eden, okay? But it didn't. It went the opposite direction. But the eruption at Hayli Gubbi forced me to stop and reconsider what the text actually says, because I don't want to lie. I just want to put information out there that is the truth, according to the data that I have. And unfortunately, I pinned Eden on the Google Earth to the right instead of to the left. And that's how I started all of my research, and everything went wonky. So don't get mad at me. I'm trying. And so when I step back, when I let the Canon speak without forcing my own lines onto the map, which I did before, the truth became unavoidable. The correction wasn't an embarrassment. It was actual revelation. And it actually backs up the Cave of Treasures even more. And it backs up where Eden is even more. So the video I showed you just recently, and I'll just play it again and continue reading this because this really shows you a lot. It captures that divine interruption, and you can see the plume rising directly out of the volcanic threshold, as I've shown you before. It'll come up here soon. And stretching not westward, but east-northward toward the true corridor where the Cave of Treasures belongs. From all of the data that we collected, that's the area where it belongs, and the plume goes right through it. The plume does not go through Eden. That is where I'm correcting. And it goes towards the corridor where the Cave of Treasures belongs. And you can see the Garden of Eden pinned deep in the Ethiopian highlands to the left or west. Okay, and that's where it's more green. It's more beautiful over there. And it's exactly where the Canon places a planted garden in the east of Eden. Okay, east of Eden. Now, and you can see for the first time on a single map that the corrected eastward line from the garden to the fiery boundary is where they went, and then further east to the cave itself. Okay, east of Eden, not west. I don't know why. I continue to think west of Eden, and I think there's a movie or something about that, and that's why. I don't know why, but I got it all wrong. But I want to correct it, all right? Okay. So they go across the fiery boundary. And then this is where our best guess is where the Cave of Treasures is, okay? Now, I assumed the cave was west of the boundary because I drew a map too narrowly, forcing the ancient world into my modern presuppositions, okay? So I made a mistake, but that's okay. I'm not mad at myself. If you're mad at me, well, get over it. But the Canon says Adam and Eve were driven eastward, okay? So that only makes sense if they were up on the high plateau in the green. And eastward means down from the high plateau toward the rift in the volcanic the volcanic nastiness, okay? Toward the volcanic fire and beyond that into exile. So they went beyond Hayli Gubbi and then finally rested where God, I believe, said at the cave where it's just a shit show. Now, the cave cannot be west of the fire, okay? It must be east of it, and that's what we found. And the eruption didn't undermine my research. It actually corrected it. And the plume didn't trace my line. The plume actually traced God's, okay? So the one thing that I got wrong was where I pinned Eden and where I pinned the Cave of Treasures. It's a little bit in a different spot from 2 nights ago. So I also went back to my show on the blog and I said that, hey, we since corrected this. So you can click over here tonight to check it out. All right, so when you see the Garden of Eden in the highlands, the volcanic barrier at Hayli Gubbi, and the Cave of Treasures on the far side of that fire, let's just look at that again, okay? That's where they are, in that red line, and that's where the plume is. When you look at that, okay, when you see the corrected east-west axis of the ancient world, everything the Ethiopian canon has preserved suddenly locks into place now, and the geography matches the scripture. The volcano matches the boundary. The cave matches the exile. And the correction matches God's timing. And that's what tonight's show is really all about. not really defending an old map, but revealing the right one, not holding on to the pride of the first attempt because I got way too excited and I released it too early, but acknowledging the beauty of the second. Now, the land, the canon, and the eruption now speak in one voice, and their message is simple. This is the way. This is the direction. This is the corridor of Eden, from Eden to the Cave of Treasures. And the plume, I do believe, was God answering us, believe it or not, that we're on the right track, and someone is now going to find it through the efforts of this show. And I believe that in my whole heart. So tonight's about the east-west correction and the new location of the Cave of Treasures. Now, the beginning of this correction starts with a simple mistake that I made, placing Eden and the Cave of Treasures way too close together and on the wrong side of the volcanic boundary. Oops. Now, for weeks, the working map positioned the cave west of Hayli Gubbi. Well, that's correct. But assuming the plume would trace a straight line toward Eden, and then I did what I did was I did a straight line after the Hayli Gubbi to the pin of the Cave of Treasures, and then I continued going straight to this cool little indent, which looks like a crater, and it's all green inside. And I'm like, there's Eden. Okay, great. Now we've got a straight, perfect line. Now, for weeks, the working map positioned the cave west of that, assuming that the plume would trace a straight line toward Eden, and it looked logical on paper, but the canon spoke of fire and smoke at the threshold, and the eruption delivered exactly that. But the assumptions underneath the map were just too small, and Eden was drawn like a garden and not a land, okay? So I put it in a little thing that would look like a garden, but they actually were living east of Eden, meaning they lived in Eden, they were living east of Eden, and then they were cast out from the east of Eden toward Hayli Gubbi. And the cave was drawn like a cave next door, not a chamber buried deep into exile. Now, the error wasn't directional at first, but it was conceptual. And it was the scale. Now, the Ethiopian canon does not describe Eden as a confined garden tucked into a corner of the rift. I thought it did. It describes Eden as a land, a vast, fertile region stretching across the western highlands of Ethiopia. So that takes the Aruku area that I put, and that little Aruku cave, or not cave, but what looks like a meteor hit that area, but it's all green inside. Well, that makes that not the right place. All right. So the garden that God planted was only a part of that land, located on the high eastern rim, overlooking the Rift Valley. So when you're in Eden on the east end, you overlook and you can see the rift and all the volcanic activity, but not when you look west of Eden. Because you're on east of Eden, you look west, and it's just all flush, beautiful land. I had taken one pin and treated it as the whole kingdom. So that's what I did. And I placed Eden on the east, and it's not. It was on the west. And because the scale was wrong, the direction ended up wrong. And when the land is made too small, the map starts lying. And so that's why I had to make this correction tonight. And that is why the eruption became the turning point, because even though I was wrong where Eden was placed, the plume was right as to where we needed to go. I don't think God's interested in us finding Eden. I think he's interested in us finding the tablet of witness, which will prove that Adam and Eve were real, prove that Jesus Christ is the second Adam, which is written on the tablet, and, well, that Ethiopia was the one who kept God's word, kept God's covenant, kept his ark, and Noah took the bones and placed them underneath the Hill of the Skull, which Joe Satriani wrote a song about. Hill of the Skull. Interesting. So it didn't align with the line that I drew earlier between the garden and the caves. Instead, it rose exactly where the text said the fiery boundary would be, and it pointed not westward, but east and northeast into the volcanic corridor. The more the map was examined, the more the contradiction grew, and either the plume was wrong or the model was, and I had to fix. Basically, I jumped the gun. I got too excited, and I wrote a whole show on where it is, and here it is. It's in this spot, and let's go find the cave. Now, even though last time I did the show, I even said I could be wrong many times, and I said I may be confusing east and west, but I was so darn excited, I had to get it out there. That's just me. Now, I could have deleted the video, and usually I do. When I do a video where I don't have correct information, I just delete it and we just do another one in its place. But I thought I'd just leave it. I don't know why. I didn't feel like deleting it was necessary. So, and I already said in that last one that, hey, I'm going to be changing my mind on this, but here's where we are so far. Now, this is the moment where humility became the doorway to revelation for me, okay? Because this mistake actually refined my suspicions as to where the cave of treasure is. And because instead of forcing the plume to fit the map was forced to fit the plume, and that's what it did. And instead of defending the earlier placement where the whole plume went over Eden, no, it just went over where God wants us to look. And the text was allowed to speak again, thank God. And when the canon was reread and the land re-examined, the correction became pretty obvious that Adam and Eve moved eastward out of Eden down into the rift of the volcanic action. And eastward means down the escarpment. Eastward means toward the volcanic fire. Because I guess when you're in trouble, this is where you go. And that's where, and it wasn't fun. I was looking at the Garden of Eden. Not the Garden of Eden, but I was looking at the rift and just on Google Earth and going all the way down to the ground and just going up, down, left, right, trying to just see, dude, that whole place is just, it's like the land of the lost. You'll die if you don't have like a truckload of water with you. You won't survive in this region. It's so vast, so huge. But the Bible does say that Adam and Eve were pretty tall, meaning 30 to 90 feet tall, something like that. Scholars have pinpointed saying that they were, pretty tall. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what some scholars believe. Now, if that's the case, then their walk wasn't too bad. But if they were our size, holy crap, going through all that horrible land and then finally ending up in a cave, yeah, I'd be pissed. Now, part one set the stage by acknowledging that the first map was not the end point of where we needed to go, but just a stepping stone for the show. And the error didn't undermine the research. It revealed the next layer. Because sometimes a mistake isn't a detour. Sometimes it's the compass that turns you in the right direction. Now, the key to the entire correction lies in rediscovering the true scale of Eden. It's bigger than I thought. And so that's something interesting, and that's a big clue. It's a land, not a garden, okay? The Garden of Eden is on the east part of the land of Eden. So that's something new that we're all learning. And the early model of my map failed because it treated Eden as a compact garden rather than an expansive homeland the Ethiopian canon describes. And now this misunderstanding compressed the geography and it narrowed the exile path and accidentally pulled the Cave of Treasures way too close to the volcanic threshold. And once Eden was restored to its proper size, everything that followed naturally fell back into place. Now, the ancient texts never portray Eden as a tiny enclosure. They present it as a grand, fertile land, fed by a massive underground reservoir and bordered by mountains, escarpments, and river systems that still exist today, like the Blue Nile. And go check that out. That's just breathtaking. The Blue Nile in Ethiopia. Now, the garden God planted was not the whole of Eden, but a cultivated portion within the land eastward in Eden. So right at the edge of where the volcanic action is on the rift, where they could see it from there. Maybe that was God's way of telling Adam and Eve, hey, you ever eat of that, you go there. Maybe. I don't know. But it was on the elevated land highlands that overlooked the rift. And this single sentence in the canon carries enormous geographical weight to it. It means the garden was situated on the western highland rim, at a vantage point where Adam could see far across the stretch of land beneath him. And it also means that when he and Eve were expelled, the first steps of exile would take them downward toward the rift. Interesting. Gertison says, a trip to Ethiopia would be amazing. Checking Amazon for Indiana Jones hats now. That would be a blast, man. I'm telling you, that would be a dream. Once that elevation change is acknowledged, where the rift is, where Eden is, where east of Eden is, it becomes clear why the Cave of Treasures could never sit near the garden or on the same ridge. Exile was a descent, okay? It was a movement away from the water-rich plateaus and into the harsh volcanic corridor that marks the boundary of the ancient Afar. And when the map expanded to show Eden as a massive western region rather than a small pin near the volcano, the path of Genesis suddenly aligns with the terrain and where they walked. And highlands become the home. And I'll show you the map one more time just so you can see. Down to the bottom left is Garden of Eden. Supposedly, that's the best we can come up with where it is. The rift is that line that goes all the way down from the top of the water of the Red Sea and all the way down to the bottom of the map. It's right to the left of the middle. That's the rift. They go down inside, okay, inside this to where the plume is. And then to the right of the plume, they settled, okay? Now, of course, they didn't settle in the plume. They settled in a cave, and that cave, as it was written, appears to be a different kind of cave than we think. It's not in the big, tall mountain overlooking the entire valley. But from this point, where you can see the red and you can see the little yellow pin inside called the Cave of Treasures. From that point, you could see Eden if you looked west. So it was glowing, and it was glowing on top of the ridge that you see, the Afar Ridge right here that flows down. You can't see my mouse. I'm like trying to show it to you with a mouse, but anyway, I'll let the video explain it more. But right there's Eden, right? Right there, inside there's the rift, and up there is where the volcano exploded, and that's where the Cave of Treasures is, okay? And then the plume, right? The plume, and then the Hayli Gubbi and the plume went right over the Cave of Treasures, which I show the plume to the left, to the right, and that's where we need to look, somewhere in that smoke. Okay, that's where the Cave of Treasures is. And from there, when they look westward, they could see Eden every day and the glow of it, right, from that area. So the volcano was pointing us towards the Cave of Treasures, and it's somewhere on the map. Now, I actually zoom in and show you it's on that little round part there, that blackened round part, which is all volcanic activity or lava rock. And as we gain closer to this pin, the Cave of Treasures, you can see it's on a rift, where the rift seems like they're on a mountain, but they're not. They were on a rift that overlooked over towards west of towards Eden. And somewhere in this area, not just where the pin is, but this is the general area, is where supposedly the Cave of Treasures is, according to all of the information that we did research on the Ethiopian Canon and the Tewahedo Orthodox writings all about the Garden of Eden. In fact, in Ethiopia, there are books written as to where they think that the Cave of Treasures is. So the Ethiopian people have been looking for it for thousands of years, believe it or not. And I think that's really cool. Now, this broader perspective also explains why the eruption revealed my correction, and the plume did not point back towards Eden because Eden was never that close. And the garden had always been far to the west, towering above the rift that they were in, feeding rivers that flow into multiple basins. Now, the plume simply rose where it should have risen, in the volcanic threshold that marks the divide between the land of Eden and the land of exile. But the problem wasn't the plume's direction. It was the problem was the map and its scale, which I had to recorrect because for some reason I was looking east of Eden, or east of the plume, or east of the Cave of Treasures, and east of the volcano that blew up, which the volcano's name, Hayli Gubbi, which means high cave, or high grave, which got me on this trail to begin with. And let me explain, and let's not forget, I've been doing research about Ethiopia for almost a year, and then not just a few days ago, a volcano exploded in Ethiopia. That's why we're researching this stuff, because I believe that is prophecy unfolding. Now, once Eden was allowed to be as large as the Canon portrays it, the entire world of Genesis opened, and the descent actually now makes sense, at least to me now. And I'm glad I went through the error because I can kind of see how it works. Because before I really wasn't understanding it, and it was because for some reason I got my east and west mixed up. And the Cave of Treasures finds its rightful place, not near the garden, not west of the volcano, but east of the fire. And in the zone where Adam built his first altar and where the patriarchs' bones were held until the flood. The correction becomes obvious only when Eden is allowed to be what it truly was, not a garden, but a huge world or big plot of land. Now, the breakthrough of this entire correction came when the geography of Genesis finally matched the geography under our feet. The canon says Adam and Eve were driven eastward out of the garden. For some reason, I was thinking they were east of the garden. I don't know. For years, scholars spiritualized that word. They flattened it or treated it as symbolic. But when you place the garden in the correct location, on the high western Ethiopian plateau, eastward becomes a topographical statement, not a poetic one. And it means walking downhill. It means descending out of an elevated paradise and into the deepening scars of the Rift Valley. And it means leaving the abundant watered heights of Eden and stepping into the volcanic world of exile. Now keep in mind, all of this happened before the flood. So whatever is left over of the flood all grew back, but we don't know if the lands changed or landscapes changed. But still, according to the Ethiopian canon and the Ethiopian people, they believe, and I believe, that the Garden of Eden was in Africa, in Ethiopia, because they are the keepers of the ark. They are the keepers of the original canon. They are the keepers of God's word. And this is where the error in the earlier map becomes very clear to me. If the garden is placed too close to the rift or too far east, the exile path becomes horizontal. But the text is emphatic. Adam and Eve went eastward, which in Ethiopian terrain is not gentle shift in direction. It is a dramatic drop in altitude. And Eden sits thousands of feet above the rift. So they had to go thousands of feet below, but a little bit up. Okay, they went down and then up a little bit. Does that make sense? Yeah. All right, the garden overlooks a landscape that falls away very sharply. That's what the rift. I showed you the rift. Now, the moment that they sinned, they began a physical and spiritual descent. So, spiritually and physically, it makes sense. And the first steps of exile were down the escarpment, all right, down the sides of the Rift Valley. And the first steps of exile were down the escarpment, out of the lush plateau and into the volcanic threshold that still burns today. Sorry, guys. When the map was reoriented and the garden correctly placed on the highland rim, the eastward motion suddenly fit perfectly. The walk becomes inevitable. You can almost see them standing at the edge of it, looking down into a world they have never known. The sky darker, the air hotter, the land rougher and broken. The eastward direction in Genesis is not metaphorical, especially to them at that time. It becomes geographical. And it describes the only possible route a person on that high plateau could take to leave Eden's boundary and enter the Afar corridor. And this is where the location of the Cave of Treasures finally reveals itself. It could never be west of the volcano because west is uphill. And I'm going to show the video again just because. It can't be west, okay? Because west is uphill, back toward Eden. The cave must lie further east of the volcanic threshold, deeper into exile, but still close enough that Adam could look back and see the glow of Eden from its entrance. Okay, just the glow of the entrance, meaning all he could really see was like a spark of a star. That's it. So they were pretty darn far away, but they could still see the holiness of Eden. Now, that detail from the Canon only makes sense when the garden is placed above, the volcano at the midpoint, and the cave beyond it on the descending slope. Okay, so if they were at the volcano, they couldn't see it. But if they went further east and up on a descending plateau and in a cave on that area where we found it, that makes sense. And once the physical truth is recognized, everything actually aligns. The garden on the highland shelf, the fiery threshold in the volcanic ridge, the cave in the deeper eastern shoulder of the opposite side of the ridge, and the path between them is no longer an invented red line. It's the only line the land allows. Eastward becomes the key that unlocks the map, turns it in the correct direction, and restores the ancient world to its proper orientation. Are you guys following me here? Please let me know. I need you guys to say, I understand now. Now, when the eruption at Hayli Gubbi first happened, it seemed like the ultimate confirmation for me because I freaked out. I even hailed Boots. I said, Boots! Oh my God! And the plume rose, stretched across the sky, and appeared to trace the very path that we had mapped from Eden to the Cave of Treasures. But that confidence collapsed the moment the map was corrected. It collapsed, but it came back. And once the garden was placed further west, on the high plateau where the texts demand it, the plume suddenly looked like it was pointing the wrong direction. But it seemed to travel westward, not eastward, and it appeared to contradict everything. And for a moment, it felt like the sign in the sky had undone months of work, right? Now, that is always the danger of revelation, all right? We make mistakes. When a single new piece of truth enters the room, it can temporarily make everything else look broken. And I thought I had to scrap it all when the volcano blew up and I was wrong about Eden, but no, basically. So, but the land is consistent, scripture is consistent, and the plume, once the map is finally oriented correctly, is consistent too. And the moment the garden's true placement was restored, the direction of the plume made sense. It was never pointing toward the cave, it was actually pointing toward Eden. Now, a volcanic plume does not move according to symbolic meaning, all right? Not regularly anyway. It moves according to wind, shear, atmospheric layers, thermal lift, and the orientation of the rift. Now, in this case, the plume rose and stretched against the direction of Adam and Eve's exile, not eastward. Now, good, because if it went eastward, it means that it would have a completely different meaning than where it went, right? Because remember, we're still in exile, okay? So it naturally has to go towards exile. As far as spiritually is concerned. But it stretched against the direction of Adam and Eve's exile, not eastward, but westward, back towards the heights, back towards the gardens, back towards garden's location, but not back towards the garden's location, but back towards the land that was just re-identified, okay? So, what looked like a contradiction was actually a correction for me. And the eruption was not tracing the path from Eden to the cave. That's where I made the mistake. It was marking the point of separation, the place where the garden ended and the exile began. And the very volcanic threshold where God placed the cherubim with the sword of fire, the plume marked the western boundary of the cave corridor, not the eastern destination of it. So in other words, the plume pointed to where Eden was, not where Adam went. Okay? Does that make sense? Now, once this is understood, the eruption becomes even more precise than ever. The volcano sits exactly where the text demand the fiery boundary to be, at the lip of the descent out of Eden. Okay? That's where Eden was. But the Cave of Treasures is eastward of the volcano. And the plume rising westward is a sign not of the cave's location, but of Eden's boundary glowing again. And it didn't go that way. It highlighted the dividing line between the holy highlands and the world of exile. So the mistake wasn't the plume, thank God. The mistake wasn't the map. Well, the mistake actually was the map where I placed Eden. I placed it on the right side instead of the left side. That's okay. All right. Now, when the map was corrected, the plume fell into perfect place to help us find the Cave of Treasures. That's what I'm trying to say. And I had to move the Cave of Treasures because, well, all of my alignments were off because I was saying east instead of west when it came to Eden. Now, once Eden's placement shifted westward onto the higher volcanic plateau, which it is, by the way, Eden is still under volcanic activity. Definitely. The direction of Adam and Eve's exile finally aligned with both the Ethiopian canon and the terrain itself. And the text says they went out eastward, descending from a high place where the garden glowed behind them, and walking into a harsher volcanic land, still elevated, but lower than the Edenic ridge. This eastward descent is not a gentle slope either. It is a dramatic geological drop created by the African rift, the very place where creation's earliest fractures carved the boundary between paradise and exile. And standing in the corrected location, everything snaps into focus. To the west lies the plateau that matches the garden's elevation. We're talking about the land of Eden and then the east garden of Eden. And to the east, where they descended into, lies the volcanic corridor that gradually lowers the altitude. I'll show you another picture, okay? Right here to the left, where you see Garden of Eden, okay? To the right of that, you'll see a ridge. And that ridge is a descent. And that ridge goes all the way up and all the way down. It's a huge ridge. That means that everything to the left of that ridge is higher and everything to the right of it is lower. Except for when you get to the Cave of Treasures, it starts to go up again. Does that make sense? So there's this valley here from the top down to this little, blackish circle area. All of that is volcanic activity, and it's nasty stuff, okay? So the Garden of Eden to the left is where Garden of Eden, where we think the Garden of Eden was, the east part of Eden land, and then they moved kind of like northeast up to close to the volcano and the Cave of Treasures. And I believe that the volcano was God pointing us to look in this direction for it in the future. Whether it's true or not, hey, at least we're trying, all right? Again, I could be wrong. I may re-examine and redo the show again, do another show on another mistake, but I think the east and west thing, that mistake is done. We fixed that problem. We'll move on to the next. Okay, so standing here, everything snaps into place. To the west lies the plateau. It matches the garden's elevation, all right? To the east lies the volcanic corridor that gradually lowers in altitude, marked by hardened basalt, fissures, and collapsed magma chambers. Magma. This is a land shaped not by rivers alone, but by ancient fire. Dude, all of that land, if you go through there on Google Earth, it is scorched. And it perfectly matches the manuscript's description of a place bordered by smoke, heat, and the remnants of the first boundaries God set after the fall. Now, with this realignment, the path eastward becomes clear. Adam and Eve did not wander aimlessly. They crossed into a zone where the terrain naturally funnels movement along a narrow corridor created by the volcanic shelf. This corridor is the same one that leads directly toward the region now identified as the proper location of the Cave of Treasures, several kilometers east of Hayli Gubbi, not west of it. Okay, so where Hayli Gubbi is, let me show you this picture again. Okay, you see the rift. You see the rift in the middle, okay? Somewhere where the Garden of Eden is, they went kind of east and northeast, and you can see there's 2 pinpoints in the middle of the red part, and the 2 pinpoints, the yellow pins, are one, Hayli Gubbi, and the other, the Cave of Treasures. They're only a couple miles apart. That's what I'm trying to say, okay? So it still flows in the plume. The plume is saying something is there. And the geology here doesn't merely allow for this interpretation, it requires it. The basalt formations steer travelers through a predictable linear route, and ancient humans would have walked along the ridges formed by cooling lava, just as the text described, and it settled in the first safe shelter along the descent, okay? So, now, let me go back to the map. Where the Garden of Eden is, they headed east first, but as they were heading, it's not like a direct straight east in a compass, okay? They were going where there was less resistance, okay? And less resistance, if you really go down deep inside this rift, this whole volcanic area, not just the top where the volcano is, but the whole thing all the way down to the bottom of the rift, it actually descends a little east and upward, so northwest. And so that's where they ended up, from down here to the Garden of Eden, and just kind of like where the path of less resistance is, they ended up northeast, okay? Northeast. That's what it looks like. Scorpion says, I'm totally getting it. Thank you, because this is really confusing to me too. But we've got to get confused together to figure it out. Now, ancient humans would have walked along the ridges formed by cooling lava, just as the text describes, and then settled in the first safe shelter along the descent. So however they got it, it was hot enough, cold enough to get them east and up, east and north, and that's where they ended up. Now, the shift resolves every conflict that existed in the earlier model. The original map placed Eden on the wrong side of the volcanic line. Okay, I placed it on the right side. It's not closer to the Red Sea, so that was wrong there, causing both the cave and the path of exile to appear reversed. But now, with Eden correctly restored to the western highland, the cave naturally occupies the eastern side, exactly where the manuscripts describe it. So, thank God. And the exile moves east, and the cave lies east. The ridges flow east, and the geography finally submits to the text instead of fighting it. Now, once the orientation is corrected, the search radius tightens dramatically, and the Cave of Treasures cannot be west of Hayli Gubbi. It's got to be east, nor at the peak of the volcano, nor north alongside the rift. It must be located in the sheltered volcanic cavities formed just east of the eruption site, where my pin is showed. Where the basalt thins, the land descends towards the rift, and the underground structures are the deepest. I'm going to play the video again because I just want you guys to get this. Now, this is where the geological architecture allows for a chamber that could withstand the flood, could protect ancient relics, and could maybe help remain sealed until the appointed time. And when the path is walked eastward and north, the land and the text actually harmonize. Adam's first altar, the cave's mouth, the eastern descent, and the boundary of Eden all fall into their rightful places. And for the first time, the terrain reads like a chapter of Scripture, with the corrected map revealing a path that was never mistaken in the text, only misread by me. Now, once the orientation of Eden shifted westward and the exile line was corrected to flow eastward, the placement of the Cave of Treasures moved into a geological zone that finally fits the textual description. The Ethiopian canon never describes a cave tucked inside a mountain peak or on the western slope of a volcano. Instead, it emphasizes a chamber east of Eden. Chamber. In a sheltered volcanic region where God had prepared a place for Adam before the fall, actually, a statement that implies intentional design, not accidental formation. Now, with the corrected alignment, and boy, that's a whole nother show right there. Now, with the corrected alignment, that place becomes unmistakable, the eastern volcanic shoulder of the Hayli Gubbi system. Now, this landscape is not raw. chaotic lava. It is a structured volcanic corridor shaped over tens of thousands of years by cooling basalt flows, pressure tunnels, and collapsed magma chambers, and it also was underwater at one time. These are the exact features that produce long-lasting cavities sealed, insulated, and protected from erosion. Now, if the Cave of Treasures exists as described, then it must be located in a zone where basalt layers overlap in thick, interlocking patterns that naturally protect underground spaces for a millennia. The corrected map shows that only the eastern descent from the garden onto the rift facing slope of the volcano meets this requirement. And also the Ethiopian Canon, if you guys have read Adam and the Cave of Treasures, that God put a mist around the cave, some kind of a mist that actually supposedly protected it. But, I mean, you know, whatever. I'm going to continue playing the video. Now, this region holds the deepest pockets in the volcanic strata. So the area where the land goes up, where the cave is, it actually has the deepest pockets in the volcanic strata. In fact, I found all kinds along that entire ridge, because I started looking at the ridge, seeing if I could find anything. I found all of these round lava tubes all up and down the actual ridge of the rift, the east part of the rift. And that tells me that, dude, there are thousands, if not tens of thousands of tunnels underneath that entire system. And there's a lot of mining that goes on around that area too, by the way. All right. So this region holds the deepest pockets in the volcanic strata, and it's where lava once flowed, okay, cooled and then hollowed itself out from the inside out. Now, creating chambers capable of remaining stable even under the pressures of the flood, because so a lot of these chambers were sealed off. And you can see that there are rocks and certain things that are sealing a lot of these round lava tubes off. Something sealed them all. You can go through, I got to do a show on this. All along that ridge of where supposedly the cave is located, there are what looks to be round, completely round rocks that are sealing off those holes. It's bizarre. And it's all over that area. Now, these features, its flows are too shallow and fractured to conceal anything on the scale of the cave described in Ge'ez manuscripts. But on the eastern side, the side Adam and Eve would have entered, the stone thickens, bends, and folds in ways that form a kind of vault or a divine hand would use to seal the first testimony of Adam. Now, the repositioning also solves the long-standing question of how Adam could still see Eden's glow while standing at the mouth of the cave. The eastern flank offers this visibility. It actually does. Eastern flank, it goes up. They had to climb up and into the cave, and it offers that. Now, with Eden now placed correctly behind him on the western plateau, Adam's line of sight stretches unobstructed all across the eastern slope, and he could kneel at the cave's entrance, looking westward toward the high volcanic ridge where the garden stood, and behold the radiance of it he could no longer touch. So God placed him there, saying, hey, you can look at it, but you messed up. And the geography finally supports the memory preserved in the ancient texts. Now, this corrected location also strengthens the placement of Adam's altar. The manuscripts describe him building it at the threshold of the cave, oriented toward Eden, toward it. Okay, so that would be westward. That makes sense if it's up on an eastern slope. An altar on the western slope of a volcano makes no sense because they're not on the western slope. They're on the eastern slope. It faces away from Eden. So an altar on the eastern slope, however, aligns perfectly with the corrected model. I'll show the video again because it's a good video. Now, Adam would have stood at the cave's entrance facing west with the garden's glow upon him. And this is exactly the orientation the texts require and exactly the feature the corrected map restores. And by relocating the cave east of Hayli Gubbi, the entire story becomes coherent now. Yeah. There are no roads and no roads in or out of that area, Scorpion, at all. No. I haven't seen any. We're going to have to backpack it in. Now, the exile moves east. The altar faces west. The cave sits in a volcanic corridor divinely suited for long-term preservation. And the terrain matches the manuscripts line by line. And the mystery does not deepen. The mystery actually seems to be resolved. And for the first time in history, the location of the Cave of Treasures emerges not as a myth or as a possibility, but as a geological inevitability. If the story is true, which I believe it is, it was always east of the volcano, exactly where Adam's first steps out of the garden would have taken him. Now, for days, the plume from Hayli Gubbi seemed to contradict everything. On the old model, it looked like the eruption undermined the entire theory, but because the old map mistakenly placed Eden on the wrong side of the volcano, the plume seemed to travel the wrong direction, as if the land were rejecting the research rather than confirming it. But the moment Eden shifted westward into its correct location on the high volcanic plateau, the meaning of the plume changed instantly, and what looked like a contradiction became a validation of the corrected alignment. Now, the plume did not point towards Eden. It pointed away from it, which is something God would tell us. You guys aren't ready for this, right? You guys aren't ready for this. That's what I'm thinking. That's what God is saying. You know, you're not ready for redemption yet. Right? It's coming. Jesus is doing that for you. So the plume is not going to go towards Eden. It is going to go towards the Cave of Treasures where we belong, right? Exactly in the direction of Adam and Eve. Now, the eruption did not support the old, inaccurate model. It supported the new, corrected one. It mapped the first steps of humanity with ash and heat. And the plume didn't trace the path from the cave to Eden. It traced the path from Eden to the cave, the true order given in the Ethiopian canon. And this is the moment everything snapped into place. The plume's path, once confusing, became prophetic. And it rose between the corrected Edenic plateau and the newly positioned cave corridor, highlighting the exact stretch of volcanic geography that the exile would have crossed. Now, on the wrong map, the plume was meaningless. But on the corrected map, the plume becomes a line of confirmation drawn across the sky. And the more the geography was corrected, the more the plume's significance grew. It did not aim at the erroneous cave placement west of the eruption. It ran parallel to the newly identified volcanic ridges on the eastern side, where the actual cave must be buried beneath thick basalt. And it followed the natural fault lines that shape the ancient corridor. It moved in harmony with the eastern descent of Adam and Eve, and most importantly, it aligned with the geology capable of supporting a sealed pre-flood chamber. And what looked like disinformation was actually the earth waiting for this correction. The plume was not wrong. The map was. Mine was. I went west to east instead of east to west. That was my bad, or I switched east and west. And the eruption did not contradict the theory, but it demanded the correction that brought everything into alignment. And once the garden's placement was shifted west, the plume's direction became exactly what it needed to be. And this reframes the eruption as something more than just geological coincidence. It actually becomes a mid-course correction and a volcanic underlying of the true path, a sign that the ancient geography was ready to be seen accurately. And the plume did not validate the earlier hypothesis because the earlier hypothesis was flawed. It validated the true alignment the moment the error was corrected. And it made more sense to me, meaning I thought the plume went over the Cave of Treasures and then over Eden. And that wouldn't make any sense if God was saying, hey, go find Eden. God doesn't want us to find Eden, right? We're from Eden, but that's not what we're looking for. He wants us to find the tablet. He wants us to find the tablet of witness to prove to mankind that God is real when man's hearts become evil continually, just like it did in the days of Noah, just like where we are right now. So the land's been telling us the truth this entire time. And of course, man, me being fallen, me being, me, I made a mistake. And the land didn't. And we just had Eden on the wrong side of the mountain. That's okay. You guys forgive me, I'm sure. It's no big deal. I told you even 2 nights ago, I could be wrong. Now, once Eden was correctly restored to the western highland and the cave repositioned east of Hayli Gubbi, the entire ancient corridor suddenly emerged with clarity. Which had once been an ambiguous zone of guesses and overlapping interpretations became a single, continuous line that matches the Ethiopian canon with a precision of old model never achieved. The corrected map finally reveals what the ancient writers always described, a narrow geological passage carved not by rivers or erosion, but by volcanic uplift and riftward descent, where every step of Edenic exile unfolds exactly as recorded. Meaning, when they went in, it was not fun. It was not fun. Now, this eastern corridor is not accidental. It is engineered by the Earth itself. It's a natural pathway formed by the slope of cooled basalt, the pull of the rift, and the contours of ancient volcanic flows. Adam and Eve would have left the garden not onto open plains, but down a channel of high black stone, with Eden's glow behind them, and the unknown stretching into the fracturing landscape ahead, which would not be fun. This terrain is unmistakable, steep enough to be described as descent, and open enough to maintain visibility back towards Eden, and the narrow enough to actually guide humanity into a specific region rather than allowing them to scatter into the wilderness. So the manuscript's geography suddenly becomes literal and not symbolic. And if you look at like the Mesopotamia and all the areas of there and saying that that's where the Garden of Eden is, it doesn't show as much clarity of highlands to volcanic activity and then an upridge like we've found here. This matches perfectly versus Eden being in the Middle East. This is actually in Ethiopia. And the corrected corridor also explains why the Cave of Treasures was placed where it was. God did not select the chamber's location arbitrarily. It had to be far enough from Eden to signify exile, but close enough to remain in sight of the garden's brilliance. It had to be eastward in accordance with the direction of judgment, and it had to exist within a volcanic structure capable of withholding time, pressure, seismic activity, and the flood. Meaning God knew that they were going to write the tablet of witness, and so God placed them in a place where they could write the tablet of witness in order to withstand the great flood that was coming. So God didn't place them in exile because he said, fuck you. You're a bunch of assholes. I hate your guts. He placed them over there saying, okay, you got to live here for about 900 years until you die. And then you've got to write a tablet, right? And then the bones of you and Eve, well, they need to be preserved after the flood because the flood wiped everything out, right? So after the flood, Noah and his son are going to come and find him, pull the bones out, but leave the tablet, and then go bury the bones under the Golgotha, or the hill of the skull, where the blood of Jesus will drip onto the skull of Adam, fulfilling prophecy. Basically, taking the old covenant out and starting anew. So, it had to exist within the volcanic structure capable of withstanding time, pressure, seismic activity, and the flood. What better way than a cave structure? And the only land in the region that meets all three requirements lie just east of Hayli Gubbi, where the basalt thickens into overlapping shelves that conceal deep, stable cavities formed by ancient lava tubes. Now, these tubes form a natural vault system, the only environment capable of housing the cave as described. A chamber sealed by God, unreachable by erosion, impermeable to floodwaters, and sheltered beneath stone forged in the earliest ages of the earth. The corrected map places the cave at the precise spot where the vault system is strongest. It is here, not west of the mountain, not beneath Eden itself, where the geology forms a lock fit for a pre-flood archive. So this corridor also clarifies the order of sacred geography. Eden on the highest plateau, the exile path descending eastward, the cave situated along the lower volcanic flank, and the rift valley opening even further east as the entrance into the fallen world. Each step of this progression is visible on the corrected map. And the geography is not just random, it is layered. And I'm going to play the video again. It's layered. Eden is elevated. Exile is descending. The cave is sheltered. The rift is threshold. And the corrected orientation restores the entire sequence, I believe. Now, the most remarkable part here is how the corrected corridor aligns with the eruption. The plume did not rise randomly. It rose along the upper boundary of the exile path. It did not drift west toward Eden. It moved eastward along the same descent line that Adam and Eve would have taken. It highlighted not with perfect precision, but with unmistakable intent, the region where the cave now must be. The eruption becomes part of the reconstructed corridor, marking one end of the path in fire, while the ancient texts mark the other end in memory. And the correction does not weaken the Edenic model, it strengthens it, and it does not reduce the significance of Hayli Gubbi, it crystallizes it. The corridor, once blurred, now stands visible as the spine of the world's first geography. The land finally matches the canon. It didn't before, not in the King James Version. And the path finally matches the prophecy. And the ancient story finally stands exactly where it always belonged, on the eastern descent from Eden into the volcanic vault prepared for the cave of treasures. Isn't that fantastic? Now, the moment the Cave of Treasures moved east of Hayli Gubbi, every unresolved detail in the ancient Ethiopian narrative suddenly clicked into place for me. For months, the search had been circling the wrong side of the volcano, trying to reconcile detail that never truly fit. Details about orientation, visibility, geology, and the flood. But once the cave shifted into its proper location, and once the volcano blew up, we had a place to go look, you know what I mean? We actually had something here. But once the cave shifted into its proper location along the eastern descent, the entire tapestry of pre-flood history tightened into a single coherent geography that finally honors the manuscripts instead of forcing them to conform to earlier assumptions. And the first correction is visibility. The book of Adam repeatedly states that Adam could see the lights of Eden from the mouth of the cave. With Eden properly restored, well, on the western plateau, this visibility is now perfect because he could see it from the east. He's on the east side. He can look and see the color or see, how bright and beautiful it was from his area. That must have sucked. From the eastern flank of Hayli Gubbi, Adam would have been facing west toward the garden, able to see its radiance across the high stone ridge that once held paradise. And this visual relationship was impossible on the western side of the volcano, where the terrain blocks the line of sight. The corrected placement restores the physical reality described in the canon. And the second correction is actually orientation, as every major movement in the Adamic narrative flows eastward out of Eden into exile toward the first altar and eventually toward the cave where Adam was laid to rest. With the cave repositioned east of the eruption, the entire storyline finally flows in the corrected direction. And the geography now reads like a manuscript. It goes east, it goes Eden, then eastward descent, then altar, then cave. And this flow did not exist in the earlier model. And its emergence now confirms that the adjustment was not theoretical, but actually necessary. And the third correction here is geological plausibility. The eastern flank contains the deepest, most stable volcanic vaults in the region. Very thick basalt layering over ancient lava tubes capable of preserving an underground chamber across tens of thousands of years. This is the kind of environment that could withstand tectonic shifts, rift expansion, geothermal pressure, and the flood itself. And that's key here. Now, the western plateau lacks these features. Its flows are shallower, more fractured, and far less capable of concealing a sealed chamber of the magnitude described in the Cave of Treasures. In fact, to the west and east, there's a lot more water, there's a lot more green, a lot more moisture, and that just won't work. You need a dry environment of an ancient volcano that hasn't gone off for 12,000 years. Right? An ancient place where a volcano isn't going to go off until the end of days. That is the perfect spot. So the corrected placement is the first to match the physical requirements of the text perfectly. Again, I'm going to play the video because I like watching it. Now, the fourth correction is the flood narrative. The Ethiopian Canon makes a startling claim. Noah retrieved Adam's bones before the flood waters arrived, and the ark later returned to the land of Adam when the waters receded. Huh? This only makes sense if the cave was located on the rift facing side of the volcanic ridge, where post-flood drainage patterns would guide the ark naturally. The western position never fit this description. The eastern position aligns flawlessly with the hydrological modeling and the ancient tradition that the first land the ark approached after the deluge was the land of Adam. And the fifth correction is prophetic symbolism. The cave had to be placed where Adam could face Eden even in death, resting beneath the vault where the first prophecy was sealed. That Christ would one day stand above the skull of the first man. That was to be Adam. And this orientation is only fulfilled in the eastern side, right? Through the interpretation I did of the Ge'ez to English. Now, in the earlier model, the cave would have forced Adam to face away from Eden. That's a contradiction of every spiritual and symbolic detail preserved in the Ge'ez. But now the orientation is actually correct. The symbolism is restored and the prophecy made geographically coherent. Now it makes sense. And with the cave finally in its rightful place, the entire narrative opens like a scroll. The terrain reads clearly: Eden high on the western ridge, the descent eastward, the volcanic faults forming natural chambers, the altar facing back towards the garden, the cave sealed beneath the stone forced in the earliest ages of creation. Every part of the landscape communicates the same truth. The manuscripts were never wrong, but the map simply needed to be turned around or upside down. And the corrected placement doesn't just refine the theory, it perfects it. It honors the terrain, the canon, the memory of Adam, and the movement of exile. It also the symbolism of the altar and the flood tradition. And above all, it restores the Cave of Treasures to the only location where it could truly exist, on the eastern slope, about a couple miles away from Hayli Gubbi, eastward, beneath the volcanic stone that guarded humanity's first testimony until the world was ready to find it again. And I do believe that whatever clues we're giving, someone's going to take this information, they're going to run with it and find it. Now, every great discovery in Scripture, archaeology, or prophecy, they all follow the same pattern. A moment of disorientation that forces the seeker to correct course. That's how my show has always been. I find something, I get excited, I throw it all out there, and then I do more research, and then I find I made a mistake, and I come back and I reverse it. And then we continue course. That's just being human. The correction is never really a setback. It's a doorway into the truth. And this entire journey toward Eden's geography, the volcanic threshold, and the Cave of Treasures has now entered that phase. And what looked like a contradiction was the trigger that God used to flip the map, reorder the assumptions, and reveal the alignment that had been hidden in plain sight. Now, the turning point was simple. The plume from Hayli Gubbi wasn't pointing the wrong way. We were. And the eruption didn't need to move, the theory did. And once Eden was repositioned westward onto the high volcanic plateau, the entire story inverted, and the plume that seemed to contradict the hypothesis suddenly became the signature that confirmed it. And the line of exile didn't collapse, it finally stood up straight. And the cave didn't drift into uncertainty, it landed precisely where the text always said it would be, east of Eden, facing the garden, sheltered in volcanic stone that predates the flood. Now, this realism reshaped the entire investigation for me. What had been a long chain of assumptions became a clean, linear geography, as Eden on the western height, the exile to the east, the volcanic descent that matches the canon word for word, and the cave positioned exactly where the geology demands it to be. The new map is not an educated guess. It is the first configuration in which every detail, textual, symbolic, geological, historical, spiritual, it finally agrees with itself. And the correction did not weaken the theory either. It actually completed it. And even the symbolism of the correction fits the pattern of Scripture. In the book of Adam, the first humans misunderstood God's instructions repeatedly. They misjudged distances, misinterpreted signs, and often stand in the wrong place until the Lord reorients them. Every correction leads to the deeper truth, guys. Remember, when we fall, he picks us up. Remember the footprints in the sand poem? Well, I'm butt prints in the sand. Because when Jesus picks me up and holds me, I wiggle to get out. Let me go. And he drops me, and there's my butt prints. And it just goes butt print after butt print every time he picks me up. And the Ethiopian canon preserves this as a theme, that God always allows the righteous to walk into momentary confusion so that clarity becomes a gift, not an assumption. So this whole mistake that I did a couple days ago isn't that big of a deal. And the moment of error becomes a revelation. In fact, God uses mistakes. He could be using that video to throw somebody else off that he doesn't want to actually find it. He's like, I'm glad you made that video because someone else is going to take your old video and they're going to run with that one and not with your corrected. That's just how God works. So the plume seemed off because the map was off. And the map was off because Eden was misplaced. And Eden was misplaced because the Western worldview conditioned the mind to think eastward when the canon spoke in elevation, not direction. And the correction was inevitable once the land itself joined the conversation. And the mountain didn't erupt to show the path. It erupted to highlight the error so that the true path would emerge to the Cave of Treasures. So once the map turned around, everything that had been foggy became transparent, and the exile steps were found in their correct slope, I'm happy to say. And the cave relocated into a region consistent with its geology. And Adam's line of sight back to Eden finally matched the terrain. Now, I'm not saying that the pin that I have where it's located is the right one. It could be further south, or it could be further north, or really farther south. I don't know. I just don't know. But this is as close as we can get it with the scripture that we have, and after we made an error and corrected it. So the ark's first landfall returned to the volcanic ridge of Adam. And the plume from Hayli Gubbi, previously a threat to the model, became the arrow pointing directly into the eastern fault system where the cave must lie, sealed. So error gave birth actually to precision, and confusion gave birth to clarity, and the correction broke the model only long enough to rebuild it even stronger, cleaner, and truer to the manuscripts that have outlived empires. So this part of the story is a reminder that revelation is not always the appearance of something new. Sometimes revelation is simply the correction of something misplaced. And this was the moment that the theory fell apart. This was the moment it was the moment when the theory didn't just fall apart. So, at least I thought it was gonna. But this was the moment it finally stood in the right direction. So I had to go back and read it again and go, wait a minute. I thought it said west, but I was wrong. I thought they left west. I don't know why. West of Eden. There's got to be a show or something, maybe that, but I don't know. Anyway. When the plume first rose from Hayli Gubbi, it seemed to pull the ground out from under the entire investigation, and for weeks the direction didn't seem to match and the corridor didn't align, and the eruption looked like a contradiction rather than the confirmation. But the moment Eden moved to its rightful western height, everything changed. And what looked like failure became revelation, and what looked like disproof became correction. And what appeared to unravel the theory ended up stitching every loose thread into a single coherent truth the Ethiopian canon had been holding all along. We have the idea of where the Cave of Treasures is now. And the story was never wrong, but the orientation was. And once Eden was placed where the terrain demands it, on the western volcanic plateau, facing on the eastern volcanic plateau, facing the west, okay? See, I always get on... It's on the eastern volcanic plateau facing the west. The world of Genesis opened in front of us like a scroll. And Adam and Eve walked eastward, right? Remember westward. Oh my God. See how I get confused? No. Adam and Eve they walked eastward. And the descent into the volcanic corridor matched the manuscripts exactly. The Cave of Treasures long assumed that to be west of the eruption found its rightful home on the eastern flank where it should be, where the geology, the visibility, the symbolism, and the flood narrative all converge at once. And the map didn't simply just shift, it corrected itself into the posture the text always required. And suddenly the plume became a sign again for me, and it wasn't pointing towards Eden, because I thought, oh man, the whole plume thing is crap now, since I was wrong about Eden. It's in the wrong spot. But no, it just pointed to the Cave of Treasures. In fact, the plume went over it. Just as Adam and Eve were walking away from the garden, well, it wasn't drawing the path to the cave under the old model, it was illuminating the exile path under the corrected one. Amen. And what once felt like contradiction transformed into confirmation the moment the landscape fell back into alignment with Scripture. And the mountain didn't move, the truth did. So this correction wasn't an embarrassment, but it is a milestone for me. And every major biblical discovery in history, geographical, theological, prophetic, required humility and recalibration. So that's just how it is. And the Ethiopian canon actually was preserved by a people who understood that revelation is a process, okay? Not a single flash of sight and insight. And now with the corrected geography, their witness stands vindicated. And the garden belongs to Ethiopia. And the exile belongs to the eastern volcanic slope. And the cave belongs to the vaults formed by ancient lava flows. And the eruption belongs as a divine underline to the corrected map to show us where the Cave of Treasures really is. So the revelation was never really in the plume alone, but the revelation was in learning to actually see the map the way that the ancients saw it.
Why do 75% of people feel exhausted all the time? The answer might surprise you. In the 1920s, Standard Oil decided to dive into medicine. They pushed synthetic petroleum into our drugs. Sure, it masked symptoms, but it wrecked our guts. Our good bacteria, which fight off parasites and heavy metals, got wiped out by crude oil. But here's the good news. We can fix this by going back to nature. Introducing Elite Potion, the world's top detox program. It restores your good bacteria by removing toxic threats like aluminum, strontium, barium, and parasites. Imagine feeling energized and alive again. They said there couldn't be a pill that did it all. We invented it. Visit elitepotion.com and reclaim your health from synthetic pharmaceuticals. Your body will thank you.
This has been Cause Before Symptom with your host, James Carner. Go to his website, jamescarner.com, and sign up for his newsletter. Also, download his free books on the breath war, the crown of blood, and the ritual machine. Fix your body by buying his award-winning detox formula, removing heavy metals and parasites. You'll feel better and live longer. Go to elitepotion.com. And one more thing, please. Just try and love your neighbor, because if you do, the world would be a better place. See you tomorrow.